go through, that's fine.
Hey everybody, this is Mark Smith, host of Digital Roughnecks, and I'm here with Hank Courtright, who, among other things, is my next door neighbor. But he also happens to be an executive consultant reporting directly to the CEO of the Salt River Project, or SRP, which is where we get our power. So welcome, Hank.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to see you
Yeah, so
in this
so
format.
I know instead of over the hedges. Yeah. So anyway, how what does Salt River do in terms of like who it reaches and its kind of reach, and then kind of tell us more about your role and kind of what SRP's current and future plans are for.
Yeah. Well, first of all, about Salt River Project, we essentially are a community-based, not-for-profit power company. You may hear the term public power. We serve about 1 million customers in the Phoenix metro area. Us and Arizona Public Service basically are the two largest utilities in the country, and we have both about 1 million customers, or in the state, both have about 1 million customers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know, but we also are the largest water supplier in the area. We have a number of reservoirs in the northeast corner of the state off the Salt River, and we capture basically the runoff from the snow in the White Mountains and save that to be able to provide water not only for the cities to be able to then give to their customers, but also to supply all the agricultural needs in most of the Phoenix metro and the rural areas around this area.
Okay.
So we've been growing quite a bit. It's interesting that Phoenix is actually growing right now at 3 times the national average in terms of growth of electricity. And it's causing us to really rethink some of our planning going forward. And I'd like to share that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what's causing that growth? I mean, I know personally there's Intel's building plants, there's lots of I mean, I see regional distribution center for Amazon. I see all kinds of growth, and there's that Lucid Air manufacturing facility and Casa Grande, and yeah, I mean, lots of stuff going on. So here.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff going on, and we, kind of how we currently serve that. We're basically right now about half gas power, about a quarter coal, and the balance being nuclear and renewables and hydro. We're a part owner of the Palo Verde nuclear plant, along with several other utilities.
Okay.
Which is the largest nuclear plant in the country right now. But we do have a number of facilities around the Arizona area, and even a few outside. We have some remaining coal plants up in Colorado that provide power to us. A number of renewables around the area, and a good number of natural gas-fired combustion turbines in the area. But as I said, we've been growing like crazy. Some points about that: economic development has been just going gangbusters in the valley. Maricopa County is the fastest growing county in the United States overall. We're picking up as much of an advanced manufacturing hub. We're having Google in the valley, not necessarily an SRP customer, but we have Taiwan Semiconductor coming in. We have some other semiconductor facilities. Intel's expanding significantly. And actually, from the pandemic, we're one of the fastest recovering cities from the pandemic, lost jobs. So we're almost essentially 100% back already. And with all these new opportunities in business and industry, our housing permits are growing. So we see around our neighborhoods, number of new housing developments going on in the east part of the Phoenix metro area.
So I imagine when somebody converts like farmland, sells it out, and then it becomes a community, what does that do to the water and power usage?
Well, of course, it increases the power use depending on what goes in. But it's interesting, as we're not much more water use than we were back in the 1950s. It's interesting as you actually go to more homes and take land out of agricultural use, the water use actually goes down because the agricultural is still one of the biggest parts of our water consumption going forward, even with efficiency techniques and water usage. So as we're losing agricultural land and having a transition to being more development, into industry, commercial, homes, our water use has stayed fairly flat. So we've been able to manage it through some of that transition, as well as efficiency in water uses by the cities in terms of, low flow shower heads, toilets, all that type of use. And even outside irrigation has saved a lot by efficiency techniques.
And we have a lot more xeriscape and fake lawns than probably anywhere in the country.
Yeah. And so, but the interesting thing is, as we're trying to handle this growth, at the same time, we're trying to reduce our carbon commitment to be consistent with what you see going over in Glasgow right now,
Right.
for the climate summit. We've made a commitment through our board of directors to go to reduce by 2035 about 2/3, about 65% reduction in carbon emissions against the 2005 baseline. And then by 2050, get it down to at least 90% or better by that time. So our goals are to be in the Europe just beyond 2050 to be almost net zero in terms of carbon emissions. And I'll walk through what we're doing to how to make that transition.
Okay.
So it's a big transition while we're still growing. And you notice all of our terms here in carbons are in pounds per megawatt hour, because we are growing in terms of sales, where a lot of utilities are not growing in certain parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going through is first is phasing out our coal facilities. If you look, we've retired and especially in 2019, one of the largest coal plants in the West, the Navajo Generating Station up near Page, Arizona. And that was, we were a share owner of that, of about almost 1,000 megawatts. But it was about a 2,600 megawatt plant, or 2,200 megawatt plant. And so that's been totally phased out and essentially torn down and turned back to the land, turned back to the Navajo Nation under a lease arrangement. But we then have a number of plants that we're retiring between 2025 and 2032. And you can see the size of those plants. We're part owners in many of them, except for the Coronado plant out 2032, which we're the sole owners. And then we'll have remaining that after 2032, one coal plant in Springerville in the northeast part of the state. Probably won't go much beyond 2040 in terms of time. So what do we do with all that energy? We, as you see here, it's essentially 3,000 megawatts of energy on a little about 7,500 megawatt system. So we're losing about maybe more than a third of our energy capacity. So what we're doing is really trying to add a number of capabilities going forward. We were able to pick up an additional ownership share of Palo Verde Nuclear from Public Service New Mexico, who gave up part of it. We've been adding solar extensively over the past few years, and we'll have over 2,000 megawatts by 2025. And almost all of that is under contract now. And you've seen it going up around the valley, in the Southeast Valley. We are expanding what we do with our major customers to manage peak demand and get them to respond as needed. We're adding natural gas peakers at a couple facilities because of this rapid growth. You've seen they're going in by next year. So we're quick adding some things, and we're adding a lot of battery storage to complement the solar to give us, our peak is normally after the sun goes down. When people come home, turn their air conditioners down. Commercial and industrial is still going at 7 o'clock at night, and that's when we tend to peak. So we have to use that battery capacity to be able to carry us through the early evening time. And one thing from your natural gas clients, we're actually expanding a natural gas plant just southeast of here in Coolidge, about 30 miles from here. Right now, it's about an 800 megawatt gas turbines, quick peakers, each about 50 megawatts, and we're adding almost essentially another 800 plus megawatts there to be able to handle the peak loads as we see as they grow. But these things may only run 10% of the time. But we need that peakers to be able to integrate with all the solar and batteries that we're bringing in to give system reliability, and possibly even have these being converted at some point to hydrogen fired units too. as the GE, these are GE units, as they modify these capabilities to be able to handle hydrogen. So that's kind of our plan for the next few years to get us out to about 2030. And when you look at where we're trying to go right now, we're at 2035. We should be about 81% carbon free, mostly through renewables supported by batteries, our nuclear share, and then a shrinking natural gas share. Natural gas going from nearly half our energy supply to about a third in 2025, down to, significantly reduced when you get down out to 2035. And we're having to make plans of what we do beyond 2035, where this natural gas component may actually be replaced in some form by hydrogen. So I'm leading a hydrogen development strategy, and we're talking to a lot of pipeline companies, energy companies, others that are looking at the hydrogen future and basically looking how to figure out how do we blend hydrogen into our system so we have a much, another option, not just renewables and nuclear going forward.
So today you're getting natural gas from where?
Basically, it comes in from two pipelines, one mostly from the Texas area and another coming from the northern parts of New Mexico.
Okay.
We have kind of a supply from down in the West Texas area, having one set of pipelines coming in and some others coming in more from the north.
So so today, I mean, you might be R&Ding stuff with hydrogen that you're essentially making fuel cells yourself, or how does that work? And then versus how would you be getting hydrogen in 2035 if things go the way you think they might go?
Well, probably through a couple sources. One might be using taking water and using electrolysis to convert it into hydrogen and splitting it, basically splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen, capturing that hydrogen, storing it. There's a number of deep underground storage basins in the region that we're working with to understand storing the hydrogen and be able to bring it back out when we need it. And the thought, Mark, is that during the spring and fall, when we have all this renewable capacity, our peak load is maybe about half to 2/3 of what it is at the very, very summer peak. So we could use that solar, use it to run electrolysis and produce hydrogen and store the hydrogen and bring it back out in the summertime when we would need it, okay, to handle some of the peak demand. The other part is looking at possibly getting blue hydrogen coming from a number of sources, either out of northern New Mexico or out of Texas, possibly. So that's why we're in conversations with pipeline companies and others looking at if there's blue hydrogen that they can remove the CO2 and sequester it and deliver it in some form. We're beginning to think about what is that strategy. So we could be a blend of both blue and green hydrogen past 2035. We probably won't use much until that time. About 2035 is the beginning of when we think we would be able to start incorporate hydrogen into this mix.
Now, some of the upstream players are, talking about responsibly sourced gas, right? But you and I were talking about the challenge of that, considering that you're getting it from midstream companies that presumably buy it from a bunch of different sources, right, get it all mixed together and send it in a pipeline. So, until the midstream company were to say, hey, everything going through this pipeline is responsible, you kind of don't, it's not like you can pick some upstream customer and say, hey, I'll buy it from you, responsible or whatever.
Yeah, not right now. And in fact, most of our large combustion turbines have two pipelines supply. And so we can use that in terms of getting good pricing, good options. Mm-hmm. It's also very important for reliability for us to have a two pipeline supply. So right now we don't get into much of the discussion around responsible sourcing. Like you say, that's more upstream.
Yeah. So for today, natural gas being a big chunk of what you do, that is your reliable source that you can scale up. And in spite of the fact that it's gone up around the world, it's still the go-to for reliable energy and
It's
stuff.
our backbone of our system right now.
Yeah.
And right now, we're modifying some of our natural gas plants to be a little bit more flexible, to be able to ramp up faster, shut down a little bit lower as we get more and more solar and battery on the system. They need to flex more. So we're modifying some of them. And it's interesting, the modifications that we're doing will actually allow them to be hydrogen capable up to
Okay.
as much as 40% today. Okay. And so we don't see them using it right today, but we're moving in that pathway of having them being capable of burning hydrogen and blending.
And we didn't talk about wind at all. There was no slides on wind, but wind is I guess, relatively small part, and probably not investing a ton in wind because there's probably not a lot of wind around here.
There's not a lot of wind. We have a small wind facility up in near Sholo area that was built a number of years ago, but the wind in Arizona is not that good. Some parts in northern Arizona, up off the Navajo Nation, there's a few spots that have some good wind potential, but comparatively, right now, solar is our number one option and is actually becoming one of the lowest cost options too.
Interesting. And is that unique to Arizona, given the fact that we got a lot of sun and a lot of space? I mean, land that's relatively.
Yes, you look at Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Southern California, good part of Colorado. We have very good solar incidence in terms of good sun, not a whole lot of clouds. Actually, our solar incidence is much better than here. You think in Florida. Solar has a lot of solar, but a lot of clouds too. Okay.
Okay.
A lot of thunderstorms in the afternoon, things like that. And we don't get a whole lot of that. So our solar radiation is very good.
Right. And it's not like you got snow and other things to hamper that at all around.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you got the land.
we have the land.
You got the land, and so far it hasn't been a place where you're competing with potentially housing developments or something. I mean, you can space it far enough out or something.
Yeah, we're out pretty far, but the housing growth is starting to catch up a little bit. So we'll be looking at strategies. Can we place solar up in Northeast Arizona where there's a lot of open land, and some of those coal plants that I showed on that map, when they're retiring, we still have the transmission lines from up there. So,
Okay.
Possibly we could be looking at in this 2035 timeframe of solar might be quite feasible up there. So we're looking at that, and then bringing it to the valley through transmission.
So is there any sort of new regulatory things that are impacting some of the things that you're doing now, or yeah?
Well, I think right now, the Biden energy plan is being looked at, and it's mostly in terms of the pace. We actually have set now on a voluntary basis, directed by our board, to get to 90% carbon reduction by 2050. Most of the Biden plan is zero by 2050.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on some of the tweaks that come out of that plan, that might cause us to accelerate our efforts a little bit. But we're already on the path already on a voluntary basis to reduce our carbon commitments.
So based on what you're seeing and where you're going, what do midstream and upstream part of the value chain need to be doing to serve you, the future SRP?
Well, I think in discussions is, first of all, this transition, as you see it, a reduction in natural gas for us. And the same thing's happening to Arizona Public Service, same thing's happening to Southern California utilities and others, New Mexico, is, how does gas supply remain an important component for supporting the system? But also, what is the transition in mid-century around hydrogen? How does it fit in? What blending is possible? What type of new pipelines might be needed? So, and how can natural gas, through steam methane reform or other reform capabilities, turn it into blue hydrogen? And that's where we've been talking to a few companies that still might take the same gas we take out of Texas right now, might be reformed, the CO2 stored, and delivered to us as an energy form in blue hydrogen instead of natural gas, methane.
Now, also too, as you mentioned, the areas you serve are growing quite a bit. So even though that says 14% of a pie, it's actually a bigger pie.
Yeah, yeah, it's a bigger pie. And important, if we can get blue hydrogen or green hydrogen supplied to us, we would probably use that instead of some, renewables or batteries because of the reliability factor and the certainty factor. So we're not firm in how we're kind of just thinking about how do we incorporate hydrogen beyond 2035 as we go out to 2050, and how will that change that mix? It may actually provide a good fuel for us to back off some renewables and investment and still be low carbon. Okay. So that transition, which a lot of people are involved in right now, and very much from the fossil fuel industry is involved in, I think it's going to be an important one for our transition as an electric utility.
Right. Okay. So, and you mentioned a lot of the manufacturers like GE or whatever, they're making it sort of flexy between natural gas and hydrogen. So it's not going to, that switch is not going to cause a major infrastructure overhaul.
No, well, what we would have to do is modify some of the plants, the turbines. It's the internal components of the turbine because hydrogen burns hotter. So you need materials inside that in those turbines. They're essentially turbines that are very close to like an airplane engine, many of them.
Hmm.
And so you have to make sure your fan blades and everything else can handle higher temperatures. But I think the important thing is there are companies all working on this. One of the leading, GE, Siemens, Mitsubishi are all working on this. Mitsubishi is one of the larger power projects in the West, of what it's called the Intermountain Power Project, which by about 2040 is intended to be 100% hydrogen fueled in Utah, using salt caverns up there for hydrogen storage and using solar and wind to produce the hydrogen. So there's companies thinking about a very high level of hydrogen use right now and trying to be able to design and work on those projects now.
I mean, I know SRP you mentioned isn't as heavily regulated as some other electrical generators, but has the influence of ESG investors, had any impact or any consideration?
Well, interesting enough, SRP as a public power is not regulated by the Arizona Corporation Commission the way Arizona Public Service and Tucson Electric Power are. Our oversight, our regulation is by our board of directors, which are elected by our customers. So we're, it's self-governed, as you might say,
Mm-hmm.
under our Arizona statute. And so what we're looking at, that's where the board who set these goals of being responsible to try and reduce our carbon emissions came as a voluntary effort, not a regulatory
Mm-hmm.
effort. Well, although I have to say that some of the actions of the Arizona Corporation Commission help inform where we might be going. Okay. But being basically regulated by our own board gives the flexibility for SRP to work in the things that we think and our customers think are important.
Hmm. And just last, so one of your roles, you said, is to kind of disseminate information about where you're going in the energy transition space with other of your peers in the electrical generation space. So how do you do that? And if someone wanted to get a hold of you, I could always put your contact information, but anyway, yeah.
Well, you can use mine. Put my SRP email is fine if someone wants to reach out. I think there's two things that we do, quite extensively. One, we work with what's called the Large Public Power Council, which are 27 of the larger public power companies in the country, such as LA Department of Water and Power, Sacramento, Austin, San Antonio, New York, and others, Nebraska, Colorado. Many of these public power organizations, we share information back and forth. I chair a kind of an emerging trends task force that is sharing information among companies on hydrogen. Equity strategies is one area we're working on. So we share a lot of information of how to make this transition and make it that we don't leave customers behind.
Mm-hmm.
We are also thinking about the equity side of this in terms of the lower income customers who may not be able to afford to upgrade their homes or weatherize their homes or buy an electric vehicle. How can we help them in some of these ways? So we're
Mhm.
actually sharing not only technology information, but programmatic information on equity issues. And then we also are very active in what's called the Electric Power Research Institute. I'll put a plug for them. I used to be an officer with them for 25 years. But that is a nonprofit research collaboration of over 400 utilities around the world in 35 countries. And so we're working and sharing information not only here in the United States, but with Europe, Japan, even China, Brazil, South Africa, many. There's utilities around the world all facing these same challenges. And we've been sharing information, working on joint research projects together. And we have a large joint research project on what's called low carbon resources, how to use hydrogen, ammonia, and other products in that area in the power mix going forward.
Well, that's great. Well, Hank, I know we've been working on getting this scheduled, but I'm so glad we got to do this. And I think it's going to be fascinating, especially for upstream and midstream customers to kind of see where, utilities are going in the future and hitting these things. So anyway, thanks a bunch.
And yeah, we're not unique in this. There are many companies doing the
Yeah.
same thing on the same pace, some even faster.
Huh.
And if we can be of any help to your clients, don't hesitate to reach out.
Sounds good. Thanks again.
All right, take care. Good to see you.